Hello, and welcome to season 2 of the Working While Homeschooling podcast, the podcast for workingwhilehomeschooling.com, where our mission is to help homeschooling parents make money, maybe even have a career, while continuing to homeschool and without losing their sanity. My name is Julie, and I am your host and resident career coach today. I want to thank you all for joining us and listening in. I hope you're doing well. On today's episode, we'll be talking to Amy, a special needs consultant. So, can you introduce yourself, please?
My name is Amy Bodkin. I'm the special needs consultant at Charlotte Mason Plenary.
Okay, so tell us exactly what does that mean?
Well, I have training as a school psychologist. So I have an educational specialist in school psychology with an emphasis in neuropsychology. I am an autistic adult, so I have personal experience. And then I also have kids with special needs. So I also have experience of what it is like at home with the kids. So I get to come at it from 3 directions. Mm-hmm. And then what I do is usually work with special needs families on helping them figure out where their kid is at, what types of curriculums and approaches would work best for their child, where they're at, what the next step they need to work on as far as trying to help their child continue to grow and develop is, those kinds of things.
Awesome. So, and then tell us about your family and your kids, your homeschooling kids.
I have 2 kids. My oldest is a girl, Jessica, and she is almost 12. And my youngest is a boy. His name's John, and he is 9. We have a slew of special needs at our house: autism, dyslexia, dysgraphia, auditory processing disorder, hyperlexia, nonverbal learning disability. We've got quite the collection going.
Yeah, I definitely can. I know that resonates a lot of the audience and me as well, for sure. Now, I know you mentioned to me previously that obviously you guys are using a Charlotte Mason approach, but have you found certain programs, curriculums, and so on that kind of that work well for your family, that make this working while homeschooling life a little bit easier?
Yes. So one of my favorite tools is called a Goalie. It is a brand new piece of assistive technology. It looks kind of like a cell phone, but it doesn't have access to any apps. It has basically scheduling apps with visual and auditory reminders. And so it will start to make noise, have a visual countdown of what you're supposed to be doing, and the parent is able to plug their to-do list for the child into the device. And then the child is able to use that device to basically check off a list. And then you're able to see on your cell phone, on your app, how it works and like what they've done. And then it will also award points that you can exchange in any way in your home. But I like to think of it as taking the opportunity to outsource your executive functioning, because executive functioning is one of the biggest challenges for kids with developmental delays. And as an adult, as an adult, I tend to outsource mine to my phone. Right. But I don't want my kids outsourcing it to a phone because they tend to get distracted by games and such. So
Right. Mm-hmm. I mean, honestly, I was sitting there listening to that and I'm going, oh my gosh, it's like outsourcing the nagging. So like you're not being the nag anymore, which is would be so.
And you get to keep it positive too, and it gives them a bit more independence as well, which is nice because they want more independence.
They want it. Help. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really the stage I'm at as well with mine being 11 and 13 is they want the independence. They should be able to have the independence at their age, but frankly, I'm really nervous about giving them the independence because it really hasn't gone super well in the past. So, and usually it has nothing, like you said, it has nothing to do with them. It's that executive function that just...
Right.
I was never good at it as a kid either.
Exactly. They just need some training wheels.
Right.
Now, there's another company, I really like a lot of their stuff. It's called Gander Publishing.
Mm-hmm.
And they put out a program called Visualizing and Verbalizing, which we have used with my son. So in your brain, you have two visualization systems. There is your gestalt imagery, which is basically, it's your concept imagery. It's like making a movie in your head of what you're reading or hearing. And since memory is encoded visually, that's how we find out what something's about.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's how we remember and how we comprehend. My son had a lot of trouble with that. And if he heard something, he might not remember. He'd only remember a few words. And so we got the Visualizing and Verbalizing program. And the Visualizing and Verbalizing program, we used it for 1 year, maybe close to 18 months. We did it very slowly. We didn't follow the exact instructions. We spread it out, so it was a little every day, and got through maybe 25%. And in that, about a year time, he gained 5 grade levels in listening comprehension.
Wow, that's huge.
It was shocking, yes. Now, my daughter has dyslexia, and so there's another program that they have that is for symbol processing, and that's your other visualization system. That's where you can see letters in your head. And I'm dyslexic too. And so when I visualize words, I can only visualize probably up to 5-letter words. And so I can only picture like 5 at a time at most. And my daughter can only picture 3 at a time. And so this other program called Seeing Stars is supposed to get at building up your symbol visualization system so that you can visualize longer and longer words, which is really useful, especially with spelling, because you have to be able to visualize the word to spell it.
Right.
So, if I want to spell a long word, then I have to spell the first 3 to 5 letters, then respell the word in my head, and then respell it again. So,
and that's a lot of steps.
It's very tedious. And so I'm hopeful that Seeing Stars will have the same impact that Visualizing and Verbalizing had for my son. But I don't know of any curriculums that get at those same basic neural processing areas. So.
Well, I will say with mine, and I know we're going off tangent, listeners, so, ignore us or listen, but whatever. So I will say with mine, it wasn't the schoolwork. My daughter, who is hyperverbal and high functioning, also has extremely low to none language processing, which I never realized because she's so freaking verbal. And she's like, if, you do the, how does your child learn thing on the internet? Basically, she was like almost a 0 in auditory learning, which was weird for me because she talks all the time. So you would think those two go together, and they don't.
Yeah, input and output are not the same.
Well, yeah. It seems obvious to me now, but at the time I was like, wait a minute, how can you be 0 in auditory? You don't stop talking. And I realized because she honestly doesn't hear herself. She doesn't listen to herself.
Well, and also, I don't know if she does this or not, but one of the tricks I discovered, since my auditory input didn't work as well, having auditory processing issues, I learned to compensate by overusing my output. So the more I used my output, the more I could find out if people were agreeing. Is that what you were trying to say? And I could kind of bounce ideas around.
Right. And that was just kind of mind-blowing to me at the time because, being a girl with high functioning, she was diagnosed very late, which is normal.
Right.
It shouldn't be, but it is. So, but like you mentioned, the visualizing and verbalizing, that's actually one of the things my girls, we have realized now we have issues with, but ours actually tend to be more emotional in nature. So she can feel the feeling, but she can't tell you what she's feeling. And she can't talk about it. So like something happened, with some kid in some group or whatever, and she got in trouble for it. but it took her like 3 or 4 days to literally come down off the ledge and calm down, so she could actually tell me what happened. Whereas if she'd been able to tell me in that moment, she wouldn't have, I would have like said, oh, no, that's not what you get in trouble for. I'm going to go after that and we're going to fix that. So like, she was honestly defending herself in one of those kind of situations. And I'm like, and I looked just like, look, if I had known, none of this would have happened. You would have never been in trouble. But because you couldn't tell me, I couldn't help you. I couldn't take care of you. I couldn't defend you. I couldn't stick up for you. All those things that moms do. Right.
Exactly.
And all those things that you want to do, but because I'm only hearing like a random adult in the room story and they didn't have the story, they just kind of overheard something random.
Exactly. Then you're not getting her perspective then.
Right. And so it took her like 3 or 4 days. And by that time it was almost too late. Like I couldn't go to the adult and say, okay, this is what really happened. And so now you need to go yell at this other kid, because nobody would remember it except for my daughter at that moment,
Exactly. And I've discovered that with a lot of the language, like the auditory coming in and then the output, one of the things that has helped us a lot has been using narration, which is something that's, really big with Charlotte Mason, but it's not just a Charlotte Mason thing.
Right.
Because
think of that. And I never knew, because we started off Charlotte Mason and I'm like, this is what the book says to do. So this is what I'm going to do. And she hated it. And I never knew why.
Yes, and you have to, especially with kids who have developmental delays, you have to start with where their receptive language is, which is usually lower than their expressive language. And so that's a common problem that I hear from parents using the Charlotte Mason method with special needs kids, is that they're like, my kid can't narrate, it's very frustrating, they don't like it. And I'm like, okay, I think you need to bring your books back down a little and use those lower books for narration. You can still read more difficult books, but you have to practice narrating back. And some of our kids with language delays haven't had as much practice and still have some developing to do.
Yeah. I wish honestly, I had understood all of this when she was younger, but I will tell you the narration was like, I read that and I'm going, well, that's dumb. Because I was like, okay, I get why you're trying to do that, but it just seems like a waste of time to me. And again, I was like, I kind of skimmed the Charlotte Mason approach. I'm going, I like, yes, that's what I'm trying to say. But I never really got into the narration personally because I never saw the point.
Well, things like narration and picture study, where you're looking at a picture and then you don't look at it and you describe what you saw. It sounds kind of simplistic.
It sounds preschool.
Yeah, but when you think about it, it's actually training the neural pathways to be able to visualize what you're hearing or talking about, and also to be able to take those things that you heard and then learn to output it. So
yeah, I really wish I had had that explained to me better, like the reasoning behind that better when I first started homeschooling, because to me it was like, were they listening? Can they answer basic questions? Like, were they paying attention? And honestly, and when she was so high functioning and she was so advanced in everything else, frankly, I just thought that was like cheesy little kid stuff, and she was beyond that. And I had no idea. And maybe we would have caught some of these things earlier. That's kind of like, it's like, if I had understood what I was walking into, but I guess that's what we all do as parents is, if you know what you're walking into, you might have not done it,
Very true. Very true. And there have definitely been, even with all of my training and stuff, and my own experiences, there have been things where I go, I should have done that differently.
Yeah.
Visualizing and verbalizing was one of those for us, because I was dyslexic, not hyperlexic, which is the kind of like the opposite of dyslexia. And that's what my son has. That's where he taught himself to read. At least by 2, maybe earlier. And that's why he was having the comprehension issues, because his symbol imagery. His imagery for letters took off, but he did not develop the visual concept imagery for pictures. So.
Okay. Well, let me head back to what we're supposed to be talking about today. Instead of a fun tangent. So let's talk about like what a typical working homeschool day looks like in your house.
So I already mentioned the goalies, and that is a big part of our day. One of the things that I do with my kids is that they have a daily list of individual things that they do, and that's on the goalies. And so when they get up, they will take their goalie and they will start working through that list. And that's going to be things like practice reading, do a math lesson. And I've picked their math curriculum based on the way that their brains think. So that they can do it more independently. I've found if you find a curriculum that speaks to the way that their brains learn best, they are more able to be independent.
Absolutely.
And then also they will do some handwriting, and I've made use of a handwriting app called Writing Wizard that will not let you make mistakes with letter formation. So when they're forming letters, we'll use that. Once they know how to form the letters, then we move on to just writing on paper. They'll have music practice, exercise. I try to keep it kind of a lot of different things where they can go back and forth doing different kinds of activities, and also short.
Right.
And then we have some things that we do together. Sometimes it's first thing in the morning, sometimes it's not. But I rotate that on a loop schedule. And so if we have a 3-day week because stuff came up, then we just go on to day 4 of the loop the next week and keep going until we get to the end of the loop, and then we restart.
Okay. So how do you fit work in with all of that? Because I know with, honestly, special needs parents, being able to work is almost like, I hear complaints about that a lot, is like, being able to work and deal with everything that your child needs is difficult. So how are you fitting all of that in?
Okay, so the goalies, they're able to do independently without me around, which is nice. And if they take longer, then that's their choice. But we like electronics in our house. Mm-hmm. And they do not get electronics until all of the work is done. Right. So if they want it, they will have to finish it. And if they want to drag their feet, they're welcome to. But it's better if they can get it done quickly and have time to play and do all sorts of fun things. I do a lot of my work at night and on my phone. So when I take them to music lessons, for instance, I will sit and do work while they're in their lessons. I also will take some time to do it at night. A lot of times, since I consult, most of my work is done via email. And so since most of it's done via email, I can actually work while I'm listening to other things, whether it's, sitting and watching a TV show that we've already seen that's not going to be very distracting, or listening to the kids practice music or something like that. As long as it's not too distracting, I can usually do the emails that way. I also have, I do some psychological assessments with my consulting that is included in the consultation. It's not a separate fee. And so I have a lot of that already pre-scanned into the computer, so it kind of simplifies. So trying to take some shortcuts and keeping it all electronic definitely helps. And then taking advantage, a lot of times of taking advantage of evenings. We do have sleep issues in this house, like many special needs families. So we eventually let the kids just stay up later. So as long as they're playing quietly, they'll stay up and I'll just keep working. Okay. But eventually they will go to bed. Right. And then they'll get up a little later. So sometimes I'll get in a little bit of work in the morning, but a lot of times the consults I can schedule whenever works for me. So a lot of times I'll schedule a video consult when maybe my husband's home and is able to take them for a bit, or when I know that they've got something else to keep them occupied. So, but most of their schoolwork can be done in 2 hours if they choose to get it done.
Right.
And that's the thing. But so it wouldn't take long if they'll do it. But a lot of it I let them do independently because I want them to figure those things out for themselves.
Right. Right. Okay. Awesome.
Part of their learning.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm feeling the same thing. So,
yes. And sometimes they make mistakes when they're learning of how not to do things. And some ways are more efficient than others.
Yeah.
But when I'm choosing their individual work, I always keep it at what they can do for themselves, by themselves, and what they will do. So when they were really small, I started them with a list when they were really small, and it was things like play with Legos, play with dolls, play a game, things like that. Things I knew they could do. And then as they've gotten older, I've slowly added and made it more difficult to the point that they're doing, grade-ish level work, depending on, their level. But it's not too frustrating or too hard.
Right. And that's one of the things I did like about the Charlotte Mason. I think I really took away was the short, like you account for the short attention spans. You don't think a 5-year-old's going to sit still for 30 minutes and listen to a lecture.
Exactly.
And I was like, oh my God, yes, that's what, honestly, when I was first starting out and you have this very, idealistic view of homeschooling and, kumbaya and all of that. And I was like,
oh, yeah.
You basically work for 10 minutes, take a break, work for 10 minutes, take a break, work. And then the next year's work for 15 minutes, take a break, work for 15. And the breaks were anything from like, oh my goodness, I forgot to go flip the laundry. Come everybody, let's go flip some laundry. Like I would make up reasons for us to get up and do heavy work. Give their brains a little bit of a break and make a move. And then they were ready to come back to it. And that worked really well for us for a while. But, I even see them now. My kids, my oldest will say, she's like, I need to, we have one of those little mini trampolines, which by the way, parents, best $50 I ever spent my entire life. And,
so true. We have one too.
yeah. And, she's 13. She's like, I just need to jump. And I'm like, I remember last week I was like, oh my gosh, where is she? Like, did she just disappear? And my youngest is like, oh no, she's on the trampoline. Because, I was like, that's a really long bathroom break. Where are you? Where did you go? Like, where are you? And then because we have a very small apartment. And I'm like, where did she go? She's like, oh no, she's on the trampoline. She'll be back. And I'm like, okay. So like at this point, like they know they need a break. They go take the break and then they're fine and they come back.
Yes, and they are beginning to learn a lot of those kinds of skills too.
Yeah.
My husband lifts weights and has a weight rack at our house. And so my son actually uses it as his own personal jungle gym.
Nice.
And there's a trampoline under it, so he gets lots of bouncing and climbing and upside down and kinds of, all those things he needs.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So as we wrap up today, do you have any last words of encouragement or advice or a word of wisdom you would like to leave the parents who might be out there listening today?
Yeah. Listen to who your child is today and teach that child. And don't try to do it all. Do just whatever the next thing is. When you worry about what's coming up or what you didn't do well before, you end up creating a lot of anxiety for yourself. And if you can just focus on the next thing, then eventually you'll make it to that entire list. But it's just about what you're doing right now. And it's the same way with kids' education. You know, we think about, oh my gosh, we've got to get this child graduate high school. We've got all this to do. We need to get a head start so we can make sure we get it all in. But nobody thinks Oh my goodness gracious. I have got to feed my child like 3,000 meals before he leaves my house after graduating high school. How am I going to get all those meals in? We better start doing 4 or 5 a day so that we don't miss any. It's something you just do each day as it comes up. You just do the next meal. So
Right.
It's the same way with education and with work. Do the next thing, stay right where you're at, and just do the next thing. Don't worry about where it's going to end up, because it will end up where it's supposed to.
That is awesome. Thank you so much for your time today.
You are most welcome.
Now, as we wrap up our episode today, I want to thank you all for listening in. There are a ton of great podcasts out there, but you chose to spend your time here with me, so thank you. Please be sure to check out the show notes for the links to my site, workingwhilehomeschooling.com, and all of the great ways that you can reach out to me online. And I do appreciate my listener supporters. So if you're enjoying today's podcast, you too can support me with a small monthly donation that's going to help me continue with great content and interviews like you're hearing today on the Working While Homeschooling podcast. Just check out the show notes for the link. I also appreciate your online reviews, all of you that have been subscribing to the podcast, and thank you to all of you who have been sharing this with your homeschooling friends. If you know someone that you think is going to be a great guest of our podcast, please let me know at julie@workingwhilehomeschooling.com. Thank you for listening in today. Thank you to Amy for being our guest. And everyone, please make sure you're joining us in our Facebook group for continuing conversation on today's topic and beyond. I look forward to seeing each of you soon at our next podcast for Working While Homeschooling.